Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. Please start thinking about those questions while I fling a pen around. Eddy, so excited.
Jen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, we're acting like we weren't in the back talking to each other for like an hour.
Yeah, we're just going to forget that we were in there for half an hour talking about all the things.
Congratulations. How are you feeling? The book just came out literally yesterday.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
I feel good. I feel astonishingly zen. Like, I feel calm about this whole thing, but very excited. Like, I spent the last 3 years just really immersed in this story and just looking forward to the day that I get to share it with people, with readers, and I guess that day has come. And so I'm really excited. Also a little terrified, right? Because knowing that people are going to be reading something that we have produced is a bit terrifying.
Have you looked at your Goodreads reviews yet?
No.
Yeah. No, I haven't
Of
looked at
course
your.
I
haven't. Of course you have. Is it felt
I can't
okay?
not. Yeah, it
Okay.
has. Yeah. Yeah, they always say that you should not read the reviews, and I agree that the reviews are meant for readers and they're not meant for authors, but I don't know. I'm a curious cat. I just can't not look. But I actually like it. I think I have a pretty thick skin. You know, I've had people say terrible things about my work. But that's okay. You know, they're entitled to that opinion. But then I read something that someone has said about my work that really touches me and moves me, and it makes up for all of the terrible stuff.
Well, I don't think it's probably not that terrible. Like, unless, but let me just say that if they're talking about the book, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, we haven't had that yet for the first, or for this novel at least. No one has said anything terrible. It's been mostly good.
I hope they don't. They won't because I love this novel. So, okay, so secret, I read this novel in an earlier version, and I really, really loved it. I always have. So this is why I'm here, because I only do these things if I want to. So, you know, I'm here for this book and for Eddy. So for people who don't know, The Tiger and the Cosmonaut is about a pair of twins, Casper and Sam. And one of them is the tiger, and one of them is the cosmonaut, and they're wearing costumes on a particular night called Whistler's Night, which is a bit like Halloween or like Guy Fawkes Day or whatever, something like that. And I think they're 9 years old in the flashback portion of the story, and then in the current day, Casper is, I want to say, in his 30s. And so let's talk about them as a pair of twins. I love the idea, the motif of twins. I love all those things that you can do with a pair of twins, particularly identical twins, as these ones are. So Casper is like the quiet guy. He's the cosmonaut who loves space, and he has a big bubble helmet. And Sam is like the angrier, louder one who's always getting into trouble. He's the tiger. Did you see them as kind of like two halves of the same person? Like, you know how we all walk around with like a combination of swirling emotions all the time? Like, none of us are ever one thing. So I was wondering, as I was reading it this time, I was really thinking about them being almost representing all of the things that one person can be.
Yeah, definitely. Like, first of all, when it comes to twins, I've always been a little obsessed with twins. Like, all things twins, I used to want a twin. I was not lucky enough to have a twin. I was lucky enough to have two wonderful brothers. One of them is in the audience, but never had a twin. But yeah, I'd say, you know, a part of the novel, an important part of the novel, and a theme that appears throughout is this idea that humans tend to oversimplify things. Right? We tend to take something really complicated and complex and sophisticated and try to dilute it and distill it into something that's easier for us to understand. And for me, Casper and Sam really represented that. So you have these two twins, and they're hard to tell apart. One is a bit naughtier than the other. One is a bit more troublesome than the other. And so people oversimplify them into good versus bad, naughty versus nice. But of course, that can't be absolutely true. They're humans, right? They are complicated beings. And Casper, even though he is the good twin, you know, he isn't necessarily inherently good or better than his twin Sam. Even though Sam is the bad twin, he's also kind and gentle and warm. So, you know, a big part of this, the characterization of the twins and a theme that recurs throughout the novel is just interrogating this instinct or this temptation I think that we often have to oversimplify things and people that are a bit more complex than we tend to give them credit for.
I'm curious, when you were writing it, did the two boys, the twins, feel really real to you? Did they feel like you could see them?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Because the way you wrote them felt that way to me.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, they really did, and you know, it was a lot of fun for me as an author to write these characters because, you know, there's an outer identity and an inner identity, and to unpack that inner identity in interesting ways was really fun to do, and I hope it's equally fun for the reader to peel the layers back and to get to know these people more intimately.
Did you like writing them as children better, or as Casper the adult better?
Oh, definitely, probably as an adult. Yeah. Like Casper was a really, he's a very complicated person, right? And so, it's for me, it's a lot more, I guess, interesting to sort of dissect a fully formed adult human, right? To unpack all of that complexity within him than it would be for the children. But it was a lot of fun to write both.
When I was thinking about the twins and how, you know, one is the bad one is the good one, it really brought to mind that sort of like myth of the Asian model minority, right? That we're supposed to be submissive and quiet and well-behaved and all of those things, when in fact we could very well be, you know, exploding with rage underneath that. And I'm wondering if this was something that you were aiming for. I think I've read an interview where you were talking about rage, Asian rage in particular. And I love rage. Like I wrote a whole book about Asian female rage. And I was wondering like how you were approaching that. I'm going to write about rage, and particularly when it comes to sort of like society's like expectations of Asian men in particular and masculinity.
Yeah, you nailed it. First of all, on the topic of Asian rage, when I had my first meeting with my editor, the man who would end up editing this book, the first thing that I said to him was, this book is about Asian rage. It just kind of came out, and I never really fully thought it through. And you know, it worked. Like it worked in that it really caught his attention. He thought, okay, this is really interesting. And
is he Asian?
No.
Oh, did he even know what that was?
No, I mean, I think he put it together. Asians are angry and full of rage.
We are so angry.
Yes, you just wouldn't know because we're just so civilized on the outside. But yeah, the more I thought about it, the more I thought Asian rage is a very prominent theme in the story. But it's not just about Asian rage; it's also about Asian loss. It's also about Asian redemption. You know, what is Asian rage anyway? After I had that initial meeting with my editor, I really started thinking through what compelled me to say that. I still stand by the fact that this book is very much about Asian rage, but back to your very incisive view of how the model minority plays into the characterization of Casper and Sam, you nailed it. Like that actually was a part of the intent with these characters, in that we have these two boys who are identical, and one is good and one is bad, and the good one is very privileged and favored and treated as the baobei, you know, the precious one, and the bad one is not, right? And in my mind, it very much reflects, I guess, society's view of us as Asians. Society, I believe, wants us to be like Casper. They want us to be obedient and polite and to play by the rules. They don't want us to be like Sam, who is a lot more outspoken, who is unafraid to rock the boat. And in a way, their characters were meant to represent that part of our identity as Asian Canadians.
I was just thinking about the development of Casper as an adult, or as a young adult, and then into his 30s. and about how so much of his anger is from grief, it's from loss, it's from resentment, all of those things. But the most fascinating thing in terms of character development is watching the rage, like he newly discovers it, like bubbling up as every chapter progresses. It bubbles up a little more. It's coming up more to the surface and more to the surface and more to the surface. And I found that that's a really like masterful character development that you pulled off there, really.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just compliments, not a question.
Okay, I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, but further to that also, because there are other men in the book. There's Ricky, their older brother, also their dad. So Ricky's also, he's quite angry and like visibly, obviously angry. And their dad is like the really quiet one, the one who always behaved. So there's a spectrum of what we would call a rage spectrum, I guess.
I like that.
Yeah.
A rage spectrum.
Where are
Where
you?
are you on the rage spectrum?
Green to purple. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think what people probably think that I'm this, rage-filled person. I'm really not. Like, I'm not a very angry person.
You can be if you
But
want.
Yeah, I know, and I would be. But you know what? And that's the thing. So growing up, I was very aware of what was expected of me, in part because of my identity as a Chinese Canadian, a second-generation Chinese Canadian. I felt it. I'm naturally more outspoken. I tend to say what's on my mind. I'm not afraid to rock the boat. I don't think I really have ever fit the mold of what people would expect of a second-generation Chinese Canadian model minority, but I was very aware that that's what was expected of me, and there are many instances in my past in which, I would observe how I would be treated differently. Like if I were to say something that was, I don't know, offside or provocative, or something that subverted their expectations of me, I would be treated a certain way, or people would just not know how to respond to that. And I've also been very, I guess, accustomed to just being louder and taking more space, because almost as a way to like push back against that expectation of me. Like if I'm in a room full of like alpha men, I'll talk louder
that, yeah.
and deeper, or if I'm in a room filled with very privileged people who expect me to play the role of this, obedient model minority, I'll tend to take a bit more space and to be a bit louder. And that's something that I think, we should embrace, right? Like we should do that. And a part of what this book is about is asking the question of what happens when the model minority decides that they no longer want to play by the rules.
So do you think then like this novel in many ways is kind of a radical act? It's kind of an act. It's truly.
Yeah.
Like because you are actually peeling back those layers on all of these emotions that people wouldn't expect from people who look like us. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. I don't know if a radical act. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say yes.
Take
yes,
it.
I will. This book is a radical act, and that, yeah, absolutely. And that's a part of the inspiration behind this. A part of the intention was to tell a story in which people from our community, from our background, decide that they've had enough, right? Decide that they are going to, I guess, right the balance of power. So just to give a bit of context to the audience about what the book's about, it's really about 3 estranged adult siblings who are forced to come together, come back to their isolated hometown in BC when their father has gone missing. And their father is found shortly after, confused and clutching a pair of scissors, and it becomes somewhat clear that he seems to be trapped in the memory of their family's most tragic night, something terrible that happened many years ago. And the story follows this family as they decide that they need to figure out what happened on that really tragic night. And what they learn is that they've, in many ways, been exploited by society. They've been manipulated by society over the years, and they decide that they've had enough. And it really explores what happens when people who have kind of played the role that they've been expected to play, to do as they're told, to sit in the corner and not cause any trouble. You know, what happens when people are pushed too far and decide that, you know what, they're done playing by the rules?
I love that for them, by the way. And they all come to that, they all come to this, like, I'm not playing by the rules thing differently, but all members of the family, actually. Also, I will say, you rate dementia really well. I thought you did a great job with that. But this is a really good time for you to read something, because you just did this lovely synopsis of your novel. Do you want to read from the book?
Sure, yeah. I'll keep it short because...
You're not going to read for 2 hours? Or
Story time with Eddy. No, I like to keep readings short and sweet. You know, I find readings can lull people into a bit of a doziness. So I'm gonna keep it short. But I was trying to decide what to read, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna start from the beginning, keep it simple. So here is the very beginning of The Tiger and the Cosmonaut. I was born on the side of the road shortly after sunset, beneath the thinnest sliver of moon. There was no hospital in Wilhelm, so my parents took the chance of driving an hour to the coast for the nearest maternity ward. They piled Nadia and Ricky, still toddlers at the time, into the family van and sped along the road that sliced through the forest. They didn't make it. I've seen the van in photos, black with a turquoise stripe along the side. My mother's pain had become so intense that my father pulled over at the midway point between our town and the hospital. We were surrounded by wilderness, deep and dark. He laid a blanket on a patch of grass and helped my mother onto her back, while Nadia and Ricky watched from the van's sliding door. There was barely any moonlight to guide my father's shaking hands. My mother pleaded with the stars, until my cries joined hers, echoing against the trees that watched over us. I've always found this story hard to believe. It would sound more like folklore than fact, as my father told it with a zealous gleam in his eyes. But my mother would nod along instead of correcting him, as she often did. I brought good fortune, at least according to Chinese astrologers. You were born beneath a new moon, my father would say. The moon of the tiger, in the year of the tiger. You're both lucky boys. Sam would always smile at this point in the story. He might have been the difficult one, but he understood how to believe. I know now that our father was wrong. It wasn't a new moon, which is always invisible to the naked eye. The silver crescent that night meant it was a young moon instead, when it would have been far enough from the sun to reflect some of its light. I wish I could believe that the heavens aligned to grant me the luck of the tiger, as Sam once did, but I know the truth is simpler. We were merely two boys born on the side of the road because our father couldn't drive fast enough.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Imagine giving birth to twins on the side of the road, by the way. As someone who's given birth, I'm like, no, that's terrible. That poor woman. I'm glad you read the beginning because it really sets the scene for where actually this book is set, which is a small town called Wilhelm, fictional small town called Wilhelm, which I was convinced was Lund near Powell River, but it's not. Apparently, Eddy corrected me. It's a amalgamation of different small towns. But was it really important to you to put an Asian family or a Chinese-Canadian family in a town like that? And also, I should say, there's a little bit of backstory here. The parents in The Tiger and the Cosmonaut are actually from Brunei as well. So there's been like a double migration there. So like, was that important to you to have that small town setting as opposed to like a city?
Yeah, it was. So first of all, Wilhelm is the name of the town. It's fictional. I can't seem to write anything that's set in a real place. I really just have this weird compulsion to have to create a fictional place for my stories. But Wilhelm is a bit of a combination between Nelson, BC, Merritt, BC, maybe Gibson's, BC, in my mind at least. It was important for me to set it in small town BC, in part because I think this book really is meant to capture what BC is in a way. Like, it's very much about British Columbia, and so much of British Columbia is is small towns, right? Like Lund and like Nelson. And one of my intentions with this story was to interrogate, in a way, these places and spaces and people who put on this progressive facade. And I think this is something that British Columbia as a province could be accused of, perhaps, right? I think if you talk to anyone in Canada outside of BC, they probably have this vision of BC as being, we're all hugging trees and, we're all just sitting around the fire singing Kumbaya. And there's some truth, I think, to that, right? Like we do have very progressive communities in BC. I think there are a lot of respectable values in our society here, but it's not that simple, right? And just like the town of Wilhelm has a rainbow crosswalk. They pride themselves in being very egalitarian. The rich people don't look like they're rich. They they dress in casual clothes. But it's a lot more complicated in Wilhelm. And just like it's more complicated in Wilhelm, it's a lot more complicated in the world, in BC. And that's something that I really wanted to examine really closely in this book. I was asked recently if there was anything that I wanted people to take away from the book or remember about the book or think about the book, what would it be? And I think what it would be is after reading this, I would want readers to think about how to look past progressive facades, look past the virtue signaling to discern the truth, to discern what's real, what's authentic, because, that can be very difficult to do, right? Yeah.
How interesting you should say that, the week of an election, actually.
Yeah, and I think that, much of what I just said, I think, is very well summarized by the results of the election. I saw so much just chatter online about like, hey, like BC, what happened to you? Why is there so much blue? And I mean, come on, right? Like, have you never been here? Right? Like we're not one thing. Like no place is one thing, no person is one thing, and BC is not all one thing. Like it's a lot more complicated than that. And yeah, there's progressivism and liberalism, but there's also a lot of conservatism, and there's a lot of everythingism, right? Like there's a whole gamut. And so I think this goes back to my thought on oversimplifying. Like I think it's a lot easier for people to think of a place and think it's one thing, but a place is never just one thing.
It occurred to me that like setting this novel in a small town like that is kind of ideal for a fiction writer because you have a limited cast of characters. You have one setting, and they're all forced to be in contact with each other because it's a small town. And actually what I really enjoyed was, I think for Casper, Wilhelm always felt really suffocating. I think that's something that he talks about quite a bit in the novel. And I really felt that sense of that small town closing in and closing in. And this is an interesting thing for me as a reader because I grew up in Vancouver. I've never lived anywhere except in a big city. On the rare occasion I've gone to small towns, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can feel it. Yeah, so that was, did you enjoy writing that like smaller setting? Was that in a way almost freeing?
Yeah. It was almost it's almost a crutch. My editor called out a couple times, like, how are these people just constantly running into each other so conveniently? So
there's only one co-op, man.
It was very efficient. Exactly. I mean, it's true. But yeah, I really love writing stories and also love reading stories that have something of a contained environment. And because even in a small town, right, like I think a lot of the dynamics that we see in a city and in the world exist in a small town. It's just a lot more condensed, a lot more concentrated, and it almost creates this pressure cooker environment in which anything can happen, right? Because the conflicts are just so much more acute when it's in a tighter space. And so that for me was, it always is very fun to write. My last novel that came out a few years ago was set on a cruise ship, and it was very...
See, contained.
Yes.
You keep doing it.
I know, I have my quirks that I can't seem to shake. But I love that, like I love taking people from different backgrounds who come with different ideas, who have different intentions, different motivations, different fears, different desires, and just like putting them somewhere close and just to see what happens, right? I love watching things like Big Brother or Bachelor, where they're just like so contained, you know. I don't actually watch that much Big Brother or
Wait,
The
but
Bachelor,
did you see
but I love like the idea.
Did you see the latest thing with JoJo Siwa in Big Brother?
No.
Oh, I'll talk to you about it later.
Oh no, I want to know now.
I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually a scene where the family's at a diner in Wilhelm, where they're being treated poorly, or a restaurant in Wilhelm, and it actually, I felt so much PTSD from it because versions of that particular scene have happened to my family over the years, many times when we go on road
Same.
trips to, you know, wherever, Vancouver Island, Okanagan, whatever, when I was a little girl. And I remember us being seated by the bathroom at a Smitty's.
Damn those Smitties. It's always a
Smitty's.
Smitty's or a Friendly's or a Denny's or something like
Ricky's or,
that.
you know, whatever. I just, that sense of we should leave, but no, we shouldn't leave, and we don't know what else to do. Well done, Eddy. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard scene to write. And one thing that
Right.
I'll say about that scene is it was inspired somewhat by reality in that, because I think everyone from a racialized background living in North America probably has stories that are similar to that. And the family that's depicted in this book shares similarities with my family in that, yes, you know, the parents moved to Canada from Brunei and the children were second generation. But my family and the family in this book are very, very different. This family tends to fit that model minority mold. They, you know, have insecurities and fears that lead them to behave the way that they do. They make themselves smaller and quieter, at least, you know, in the past. And my family has never been like that. Like, my family has always been very just outspoken, and so this diner scene was inspired by something that happened to my family. We went to probably a Smitty's, let's be real, something like that. And I remember my dad, who is like not a meek person, you know, like he was like, okay, we're leaving, because he felt like the hosts of the restaurant were being racist, that they were making us wait longer than everyone else. So he was like, we're getting out of here, we're going. And he made probably, you know, a bit of a mini scene about it. And I'm sure at the time I was probably, you know, mortified. I was like, what are you doing? Why? I'm hungry. But in hindsight, I just really respect that quality in my parents, because it must be so hard to resettle in a new country and try to understand, like, how do people live here and have to contend with the discrimination or the minimization, and they were something of role models for me in that regard, in that they didn't take that bullshit. You know, they just did it. And I think inherited a lot of those qualities, in that I don't take any bullshit like that. You know, if they're gonna make me wait longer, I'm out of there. So that that scene was inspired by something that was from real life.
Do you ever wonder how our parents had the strength of mind and fortitude to even, you know, stand up for themselves in those situations?
Yes, all
Yeah.
the time. Yeah, I couldn't imagine. It must be so difficult. Like, even learning the language, like, even that alone would be so difficult. I imagine myself, you know, I love having these romantic ideas of myself moving to a foreign country and just starting a new life. I'm like, okay, now I've got to learn, you know, Thai. Like, how, like, it's, even that alone would be such a hurdle. But to actually relocate your entire life and just decide, all right, this is where I'm going to build a life, and then do it. Like, it'd be terrifying.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine moving to a new place and trying to, like, figure out how to get a mortgage,
Yeah.
or buy a car, or, like, raise children and send them to school, like, all of these things. And your book actually really talks about that quite well. So here's a question. Casper, in The Tiger and the Cosmonaut, is making a graphic novel. He's writing a graphic novel and illustrating it. Have you ever actually tried to do it yourself, just so you knew what he was writing?
No, I didn't. But you know what I will say is that I grew up being the kid who draws. Like I was the artistic kid, right? And so that has always been, I don't know if I call it a talent. At least back then it was a talent. It was definitely a talent that I didn't nurture. So I don't do as much drawing anymore, but that was like my thing. I used to draw whales. Yeah, I was obsessed.
That's very cute.
I was obsessed with whales. I drew a lot of whales. I don't know why, but I still love whales. I even started this trend in elementary school around monograms. I turned my initials, which at the time were ET, into a monogram, and then all of a sudden everyone in class wanted a monogram, and so I designed everyone's monograms. So drawing was just like a thing.
You're like
that I did.
you were the cutest child. That's very cute.
Yeah, I like to think so. I mean, if you saw me with my sweater vests, my cardigans, yeah.
It's fine. I was drowning in plaid and dirty jeans. Like it's fine. The reason I asked that because when you describe the graphic novel in this book, I can see it. So Casper's writing a graphic novel featuring a boy who's a cosmonaut, and he has a bubble helmet, and he has a dog who goes into space with him named Orbit. Yeah. And I'm like, that's really cute. I hope you've drawn it.
I feel like I have to now.
Yeah, I can just imagine Orbit. Do his ears poke out of his helmet?
Oh, shoot. I haven't even thought about that.
They
I always
should.
pictured him without a helmet, but you're right. He needs a helmet.
Yeah, he also breathes. Yeah.
So, yes, I imagine his ears there'd be little holes in his helmet for his ears, right?
Stop it. I want this book so
really
bad.
Really floppy ears.
Yeah, really floppy, like Beagle-esque.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No corgi.
Oh,
Although-
pointy.
Maybe a corgi body and a beagle ears. A borgie.
So like a big butt and floppy ears is what you're telling me.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so I just watched the trailer for Sinners by Ryan Coogler starring Michael B. Jordan, which features a set of twins. Michael B. Jordan plays the twins. I haven't seen the movie yet. I need to see it because who doesn't want a double dose of Michael B. Jordan? I sure do. Is there an actor who could play Casper and Sam as twins?
You know what? I've been thinking
Child
about
or
this.
adult?
I've been thinking about this, and first of all, just on Sinners, I want to see that too. And it's just really funny because I've written a book about twins, and now I see twin stuff everywhere. It feels like they're just
Okay,
twins.
that's a little
everywhere.
weird. Yeah.
I know, right? But no, you know what? I've thought about this, and it's really bizarre because I do this thing sometimes when I write a book, and I do you probably do this too, right? Like you think, oh, who would be the cast if it were
I
adapted?
do it
for
every time.
Yeah.
None
It's
of my
hard not
books have been
to.
made into movies, and yet I still do it.
But I can't cast. I cannot cast Casper. Like I can't find. No one comes to mind. I can cast every single other character. So the mother, Elizabeth, Michelle Yeoh.
Obviously, because
Of
we need
course.
her in everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I would even let her play Casper. Like if she said,
took
"I'll
a
do
job.
it,"
She
but
took
I'll, yeah, sign. You're in. The sister Nadia, I picture Aquafina, but like toned down Aquafina.
Like Farewell Aquafina,
Yes.
as opposed to like Nora from Queens Aquafina. Yeah.
I love Aquafina. Anthony, who is one of the only non-Asian characters. Jonathan Groff.
I love Jonathan Groff.
Do you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see it. I see it.
Yeah. But
Perfect.
Casper, I can't find a.
What about Ivan?
I haven't really thought about Ivan.
Because he could be fun to cast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he would be.
I see him as a seething volcano.
Sorry, a
I think
ceiling.
he's got a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
Ivan does. So he has
Ceiling
to-
volcano. I like that.
like a seething volcano. So you
A
have to-
seething volcano. Okay.
somebody with a lot of depth.
Yeah, he is a volcano.
Austin Butler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should do this together. We should just go.
We should just make movies. Somebody give us $10 million. Okay, so this is going to be my last question for you before we go to questions from the audience. So I hope you were all thinking. So this is a question that someone asked me recently, and I thought it was a really good one. In the last 10 years, we've seen more and more sort of Asian creators doing stuff, making films, writing books, being in charge of their own projects, which has been really, really exciting. I've felt that it's been cool to be Asian for the first time in my life ever, so that's pretty fun. What else would you like to see develop for Asian authors, Asian artists, Asian people who are just creating out there?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's tempting to say, oh, we should have like all Asian literary festivals or all Asian awards for Asian writers, and I don't know if that's what I would want. I think what I would want is for more Asians to be longlisted or to win the awards that exist, right? And to be featured in more events at literary festivals and to just have more prominence in that regard. I think if I were to pick one thing in the literary realm, probably just like more Asians working in the industry, like more
Yeah.
acquiring books, right? Like
Yeah.
more working in publicity, more editing. Like that's the way to just improve the diversity of stories, is improve the diversity of the people who are choosing which stories to tell and which stories make it to shelves and to readers. So I feel like I would do that. But if I were to just hijack your question and take it out of the writing and art realm, I'd love to see more Asian athletes.
Ooh,
Like
yeah.
just like butch Asian athletes like playing sports, you know, like and making millions of dollars doing that, just in the NHL and the NBA and the CFL, like just more of that. I think that's a space that we don't see our like, you know,
We
being
don't.
as prominent and successful.
I remember, so every time I watch like a hockey game, which is not that often, but when I watch an NHL game, and if there is an Asian player, I'm like, is that guy Asian? I'm so excited. Like,
Yeah, who was that one big one? Paul Korea. Does anyone know?
yeah.
Korea.
He was from here, from North
No?
Van.
Nobody
I know
else?
who they're
You
too
know,
young.
okay,
They're
Paul
too
Korea.
young.
Yeah, he was on the Mighty Ducks, right?
That's right, yeah.
And he was probably the first Asian hockey player
He was
I've
from North
ever
Vancouver.
seen.
I had
I didn't know
a
that.
mad crush on him when I was like a
Okay.
teenager. Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, I know him. Thank you for that. And also to your point about publishing, there are not very many Asian acquiring editors or Asian people in management or senior positions. Some in entry level. So in terms of like editors in Canada who are Asian, I could probably count them all on one hand, and I'm one of them.
And you're one of them.
Yeah, and we're all competing for the same books. True story. So I hope you guys have some questions. I'm gonna put on my glasses now so I can see your nice faces. Right now, the only person I see with clarity is Eddy. Yeah, if you have a question, you can just shout it out, and I will repeat it for the recording. I'm such a nerdy Asian girl. I have my glasses in a little thing with like my wiping cloth, like whatever. My mom would be so proud.
I would expect nothing less.
Right?
Otherwise, it's just gonna get all smudged and.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not just taking it out of a pocket.
You're not an animal.
Yes, you have a question. Yeah, what have you found to be inspiring in Asian literature or other parts of contemporary culture? A great question. We love to celebrate things. Yeah.
I do think that sort of outsider stories are becoming a lot more popular, right? Like I think these outsider stories have always existed, but people seem to be have more of a hunger for them. So, you know, I'm thinking about stories like Crooked Teeth by Danny Ramadan. He's a local queer Syrian author who is also a refugee, and his memoir is incredible. And just seeing how much buzz that book created and how many people were reading it was really inspiring for me. And I think there's more and more of this. I think people are looking for stories that come from places that are not so familiar, you know, not so mainstream, and I think that's been really encouraging to see, not just the fact that, you know, they're getting published and they're being made available, but people are reading them and embracing them. So that's been really inspiring for me. Also seeing just really good, really unique queer literature, because that has, you know, queer literature has been around since James Baldwin or before James Baldwin, but more and more so over the recent years, I've noticed that they seem to just be about different topics than they might have been before. Like not just about the coming out experience and not just about just the devastation of the AIDS pandemic and all of these really traumatic, like deep, dark subjects. Now there are queer characters who are just having romances, and just getting
Yeah, like
swept
queer
out there.
romance is so big right
Yes,
now.
yeah,
Which is
exactly.
awesome to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, let the queers have a happy ending, and I'm seeing more of that in literature.
Yeah, the queer romance thing is on TikTok. It's great. Book talk, pardon me. I talk like I barely understand book talk, guys. Barely. We have someone at the office who keeps track of that stuff, and she explains it to us once every 3 months, and I'm like, okay, thank you for that.
I refuse. I can't do another social media platform. No, thank you.
And now there's like Storygraph, which is like a competitor for Goodreads,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I can't.
It's a lot.
No, my CPU, all the memory is used up, guys. Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Oh dear. Yes, in the back there.
Thank you.
Oh, good question. What are you most proud of about this book, or in this book?
Oh. I will say that I am proud of this book, which in and of itself is a positive thing, because that isn't always the case. Like I'm always proud of my work, but there's something, I'm a big believer in that when you finish a story, it's just done. Move on to the next thing. Like I don't let myself continually tinker with something until it's perfect, because it'll never be perfect. And so what that has led to in the past is, looking back and thinking, oh, like it could have been so much better. I don't feel that way about this book, at least not today, a day after it's come out.
There's still time. No,
There's
I'm kidding.
still time. Ask me a few months from now. But I think something that I'm really proud about this book is that it represents more of who I am in my lived experience in ways that my past work has not. So, we spoke a lot about how my elements of my family and my history appear in the book. And even though it's not a memoir and the family and the characters have nothing to do with me or my family, it reflects the experiences that people like my family have experienced and do continue to experience. And to be able to put that on the page has been really meaningful to me, because I haven't really done that in this way with my past work. And I've been asked before about like how similar is this family to your family? Like how similar is this life, the lives of the people in the book, to your life? Why did you decide to write a novel instead of a memoir? And my answer to that is, well, we're very different, but something that I do share with Casper, who's the protagonist in the novel, is much of what I share with probably Jen, with many other second-generation Canadians, right? Like even though we're all different people, like I think we contend with very similar things and have very similar experiences, some of which we've discussed today. And so just, having that personal element of my history just on the page has been really fulfilling for me.
That's really nice. Would you ever write a memoir?
No.
I don't recommend
it. It terrifies me.
It's very scary.
My life isn't interesting enough to write a memoir.
Okay, my whole thing is, like, do you even like yourself enough to spend all that time thinking about yourself?
I do.
Most of us don't.
I love myself.
Yeah.
You wrote a memoir, didn't you?
Yeah,
Superfan
I did.
was a memoir.
It was a terrible process.
Yeah.
I love the book, but it was a terrible process.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't want to think about my life for, like, 5 years.
How would you describe the process? Was it terrifying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, every day was a horror show.
It's almost like
I love the
you're
book.
the
Please
therapist.
go buy it.
You're both the therapist and the patient, right?
Yes,
In a way?
and you're parsing what things mean.
Oh.
So, like, for example, I remember at some point I wrote something about it occurred in year 2007, and then my editor was like, "But how did you feel in this moment?" And I wrote back in the comments, "I don't remember, therefore I had no feelings in 2007 at all." And because I didn't even want to think about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's besides the point. Does anyone else have a question? Yes, right there. Yeah, why would you wait till your third to write more things that are closer to your family as opposed to, say, your earlier books?
That's a good question. My therapist might be able to answer that one.
It's
I
very
don't know.
thoughtful
There's gotta
question.
be, there's gotta be a reason. I think there might be an element of self-protection, maybe. Something that I love about fiction is, you know, it can reflect as much or as little of myself in my life as I want it to, and I can disguise it as a story. And I like having that distance, and I also like having the freedom to be able to do that. You know, my first book, I had a very specific story that I wanted to tell, and my identity just had nothing to do with it. And so that wasn't even something that I considered. The story was just very fully formed in my head, and I knew what I wanted to tell. But funnily enough, when that book came out, I got asked questions like, so why did you decide to make the main character white and not Asian? I'm like, I don't know.
Just 'cause?
Yeah, it was just such an interesting question, but I got asked questions like that. And fair enough, right? I mean, and I actually thought it through and actually there were reasons why, but yeah, I didn't always feel compelled to write books that reflect my identity and my communities. And I may not again, you know, like I don't know if there's necessarily, yeah, like who knows, but I think, yeah, I think a part of it is knowing what I want to write and whether my identity needs to play a role in that. And I think for my first book it didn't, but for this book it did, and I felt like I wanted to. One thing that I'll add to that though is I do feel something of a responsibility to reflect my communities in my work, right? The Chinese Canadian experience, the queer community, it's important to me that as an author, I represent that in my work. And so there are usually many elements that reflect that. But this book especially, I think, is the closest in terms of really reflecting my experience as a second-generation Asian Canadian.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes. Okay, how long did it take you to write the book, and what's next?
Ooh, a two-parter. It took too long to write this book. This was actually a very difficult book for me to write, but I'd say it probably took about a year to write the first draft, and then another, oh my gosh, 2 years to edit it, to finesse it into what it is today. Like it grew and then it shrank, and it was quite a process. But I have said that this has been the most difficult story that I've written for many reasons, and a part of it was because, you know, it was such a lengthy process, and I wanted to get it right. In terms of what's next, so it's not too soon to ask me that, because this book, you know, has been in the making for a long time. Publishing does not move quickly, if anyone was wondering. And so Jen and I were just talking about this in the green room about how over the past few months, it's actually been a little challenging trying to get myself back into the headspace for this event, because in a way I've already moved on. You know, I'm writing a fourth novel, which is very different from this. So this is very much like a literary mystery or thriller. My next novel, I don't think, it's not really going to have any mystery at all. It's going to be a speculative.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I got that reaction from you. Yes. It's going to be a speculative adventure that is something of a utopian vision, or a possible utopian vision of what the future might look like. And that's the book that I'm currently writing. And so my headspace is very much in there. So over the past few months, I've had to like bring myself out of that and put my head back into this book, because it's coming out, and I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about it. So now my head is back in Wilhelm, which is the town that appears in the novel. But yeah, I'm busy working on my fourth novel. Wish me luck. Thank you.
The genre shifting is fascinating. I love that for writers. You learn something
Yes.
new every time, which is really great. I wanted to thank everybody for coming. Hello, everyone. I wanted to thank the Vancouver Public Library for hosting this, and everybody at the Vancouver Public Library. Also, Upstart and Crow is here. Thank you. Also, please buy a book. Eddy will sign. And I do want to thank Eddy Boudel Tan, who is just a human delight, and I love spending time with him. So yay. Everyone a hand for everything. Yay.
Thank you, Jen. And since we're doing thank yous, I feel like I want to thank you too, because I know how difficult or challenging it can be to be a moderator for this kind of event. I really just appreciate your deciding to take this one, because as you said, you don't do the ones that you don't want to do. So I'm happy that this is one that you did want to do. And thank you to Jorge and Andrew and everyone at the Vancouver Public Library for putting on these events. They're just such an important part of our city's, cultural landscape. So just thank you for the hard work that you put into this. I appreciate that what you do for our community and what you do for me in my career. And also want to thank everyone who showed up today. Like it's very difficult to compete against a sunny day in the spring in Vancouver. And so just showing up to these events and being here to celebrate this with me means a lot. So thank you all for being here.